Hello everyone and welcome to Bappa Ani Data, a data exploration of Ganeshotsav. This is part of an education and outreach series launched by Jnana Prabodhini Foundation's analytics team, that is JPF Analytics. JPF Analytics is a non-profit computational social science platform engaged in research, analysis, and policy making. You can read more about us at Jnana Prabodhini Foundation's website, jnanaprabodhinifoundation.org/analytics. Part of what we do includes organizing education and outreach programs such as this one. All of our previous programs are available on JPF's YouTube channel, and they include topics such as data analysis pipelines, introduction to data scraping, to data visualization, an overview of think tanks, research, computational social science, artificial intelligence and its impact on education, and more. Feel free to check it out. Today's session is Bappa Ani Data, a data exploration of Ganeshotsav. It is a special session organized because of Ganeshotsav going on right now. And therefore, I wish you all a very happy Ganeshotsav. Sarvanna Ganeshotsavacha hardik shubhechha. And let's begin by asking a very simple question, what is Ganeshotsav? So pretty straightforward. It's a festival celebrating the birth of Ganesha. And many festivals across the world, such as Christmas or Janmashtami, are also festivals that celebrate the birth of important religious figures, such as Jesus or Krishna. Similarly, Ganeshotsav celebrates the birth of Lord Ganesha. There he is, the Ganesha, also known as Ganapati, is a very iconic figure and an iconic god, most obviously distinguished by his elephant head. But that's not all that's there to Ganesh. He also is known for many other things, including being the god of good luck, of knowledge, of learning, wisdom, of strength, both mental and physical. And he's worshipped before important events and rituals. He's worshipped often before you're starting off on a new auspicious endeavor. So that's a little bit about Ganesh. Ganesh is actually one of the most popular Hindu gods. So this is data from a survey, one of the largest surveys of religion in India, done by Pew Research, which had about almost 30,000 respondents, and you can go and read about it in detail if you wish. And that survey found that Ganesh is actually among the top three, is the third most popular god among Hindus in India, in the sense he's the third most popular when Indian Hindus are asked to respond to the question, which deity do you feel the closest to? And participants were allowed to choose up to 3 options. And there's a caveat, though, that was across all of India. If you just take a look at the west of India, which includes the state of Maharashtra, where Jnana Prabodhini is situated, you can see that Ganesh is by far the most popular god in Western India, the most popular god. And you can also see that Ganesha's popularity is particularly strong in the Western region. So this is the popularity of Ganesh across different geographical regions of India. And Ganesh is, he stands out as being, more popular in the northern and western parts of India. He's not just popular in India. Ganesh is also popular beyond India, and he's known by different names. So in Japan, he's known as Kangiten. You see him in Thailand, in Tibet. Ganesh also has a central role in other religions such as Buddhism, and you see him on currency notes and countries such as Indonesia. And there's a very interesting story about this that you can go read, of how Ganesh came to be on the currency notes of Indonesia. It happened right after an economic crisis. So that's all I'll say about it. And Ganesh Utsav, as is a festival that celebrates the birth of Ganesha, as we have seen. It is a very big festival. It is celebrated in Western India in particular with a great deal of pomp and splendor. There more than millions people throng the streets of cities such as Mumbai and Pune. So you see a picture of Mumbai in front of you, and it is a very popular festival in Western India. And what does it celebrate, right? It celebrates Ganesha's birthday, and Ganesha's birthday occurs on a specific day. That day is called Ganesh Chaturthi. And Ganesh Chaturthi is actually the 4th of Bhadrapad. And what is Bhadrapad, you might ask? Well, Bhadrapad is the 6th month of the Hindu calendar. And here you can see the names of the months of the Hindu calendar in Marathi. There's slight variations in different regional languages of India, but there's Bhadrapad, the 6th month of the Hindu calendar. And Ganeshotsav occurs for a period of 11 days in Bhadrapad from Bhadrapad Shukla Chaturthi, that is the 4th of Bhadrapad, to the 14th of Bhadrapad. Ganesh Chaturthi is the 4th of Bhadrapad, and the final day of Ganeshotsav, that is Anant Chaturdashi, is the 14th of Bhadrapad. Funnily enough, though, some years Ganeshotsav can occur for 10 days. So in this year, in fact, in 2023, Ganeshotsav is occurring for 10 calendar days. So you see it going from the 19th of September to the 28th of September 2023. Some years Ganeshotsav does indeed occur for 11 calendar days. So for example, in 2020, it occurred from the 22nd of August to the 1st of September. But there are some days, some years where Ganeshotsav actually occurs for 12 calendar days. So in 2017, Ganeshotsav spanned from the 25th of August to the 5th of September. So it was a 12-day long Ganeshotsav. So what's the deal with this? What's going on over here? Well, to answer this question, to address why there's this discrepancy in the number of calendar days, this seeming discrepancy, we want to ask a very basic question, right? How long is a day? And the answer to is that it depends on how you're measuring a day. If you're taking a look at solar days, in that sense, a day is 24 hours long, and solar days is the time that we generally use on a daily basis. It's the Western Gregorian calendar. It's how the international time zones are organized. However, that's not the only way of measuring time. There are other ways which are not just dependent on the sun. Ganeshotsav is actually based on the Hindu calendar, as we described, and the 4th and the 14th of Bhadrapad are actually based on the cycles of the moon. So the 1st of Bhadrapad, where we start beginning in the Shukla Paksha, describes the waxing phase of the moon. So it begins near the new moon. So the 4th of Bhadrapad, that is Ganesh Chaturthi, would actually not be on a new moon, but would be with on the beginning of the waxing cycle of the moon. And the day right after Anant Chaturdashi would be the 15th. So it would be the full moon day. So Ganeshotsav is actually celebrated or reckoned for based on a lunar calendar. It's actually not even a lunar calendar, purely a lunar calendar. It's a bit more complicated than that. It's what we call a lunisolar calendar. It involves calculations both with the moon and with the sun. And in fact, there is a slight nuance of what constellations are involved as well. And therefore, the length of a day, according to these lunisolar reckonings in the Hindu calendar, can span anywhere between 21.5 to 26 hours. And that is the reason for this discrepancy that we see in days. And therefore, Ganeshotsav, which goes from Ganesh Chaturthi to Anant Chaturdashi, can actually be either 10, 11, or 12 solar days, depending on which year you're looking at. And this is actually a data set of how many calendar solar days Ganeshotsav was celebrated throughout the past century. So from 1924 to 2023. And you can see that it about half of the times it was in fact celebrated for 11 days, but a quarter of the time it was celebrated for 10 days, and another quarter of the time it was celebrated for 12 days. So you can see how there are these cycles of how the duration of Ganeshotsav changes each time, and changes across the years, going from 10 to 11 to 12 days, and it varies each year. So that's so much for the duration of Ganeshotsav and when it is celebrated. Now we turn to the question of how do people celebrate Ganeshotsav? And you can already see answers to this question in the pictures in front of you. And we should be careful when we address this question, and we should qualify it by saying that we are actually asking how do people celebrate what we call Sarvajanik or public Ganeshotsav. So let's take a closer look at that. So public or Sarvajanik Ganeshotsav is Ganeshotsav celebrated out in the streets, and we learn more about what it actually means in the next few minutes. And we'll be taking a look at a brief history of public or Sarvajanik Ganeshotsav, and it's goes back to the 1700s, that is the 18th century. Then we'll also be taking a look at a period at the end of the 19th century. We'll be taking a look at the middle of the 20th century, and then we'll also be turning our sights to how Ganeshotsav is celebrated today. Another caveat I should give here is that this is largely tracking the history of Ganeshotsav in Pune. That is for historical reasons, as we'll come to understand. Pune had a significant role in the history of Maharashtra and the history of Ganeshotsav. So it is in many ways the history of public Ganeshotsav. But we do admit that public Ganeshotsav may have had other histories as well in different parts. We'll be focusing on Pune, which does actually mirror the history of Maharashtra to a large extent. And we will also be giving data from Mumbai as well. So it won't be completely Pune-centric, but a large part of this data will be restricted to Pune. And one reason why that is the case is because the early history of the published Ganeshotsav goes back to the Maratha Empire, which was centered in Pune, and at a time spread out across the Indian subcontinent, going beyond Attock near Peshawar down to Tanjavur in Tamil Nadu. And the court of the Maratha Empire was centered in Pune, and that darbar or that court involved rule by the Peshwas. And here you can see a painting of that, the Peshwas, the Peshwa court. And one of the first descriptions of public or Sarvajanik Ganeshotsav that we have is in the court of the Peshwas. So this is by court of the Peshwa Savai Madhavrao in August of 1792. And I'll read out the description to you. So among some of the public festivals in Pune included Dasara, Ganesh festival, and Holi. They were celebrated with great rejoicings on a grand scale. There were a great number of sports and amusements. There were athletes, dancers, actors, musicians, and several other performances that were collected in Pune. It was in the Peshwa's palace where the Ranga Mahal was decorated. There were beautiful crystal chandeliers and crystal globes, paintings, and they shed a brilliant light on the assemblage. So this was a description of Ganeshotsav in the Peshwa's courts. And on the right, you can actually see a little map of the Peshwa's court, of how their darbar was decorated at that time, where the Ganpati would have been, where the Peshwa would have sat, where the courtiers would have been. So there is a rich history of public Ganeshotsav in Maharashtra that goes back centuries. However, soon Maratha rule came to an end, and in the 19th century, that's when the British Empire ruled most of India. It ruled India directly in some parts. So Pune was directly ruled by the British. Other parts were ruled by princely states. And this is a description of Ganeshotsav during the British Raj. So it's by Angelo de Gubernatis from the Bombay Gazette from 1886. And that's it. Let's see what he has to say about it. So there were crowds who had possessions with an infinite number of idols of God Ganesha. In each little quarter of the town, each family with its adherents, each little street corner, I might also say, there was a procession of their own. And even the poorest were seen carrying something as simple little plank with their little idol or their little papier mache. There would be crowds, more or less numerous, accompanying the idols, clapping their hands, raising cries of joy with a little orchestra generally preceding the idol. And for many of you who are listening to this, this might seem familiar because this is in many ways very similar to how Ganeshotsav is celebrated even today, not just in Maharashtra or Pune, but even in other parts of the world. So this is an example of Ganeshotsav being celebrated in the western part of Africa, in a country called Ghana. So this is Ganeshotsav by Ghanaian Hindus. However, after 1886, in the 1890s, public Ganeshotsav got a new character. It got a new face, and you can trace it down in Pune, in Maharashtra, to individuals such as Lokmanya Tilak and Bhau Rangari. And there's a lot of history behind this, which we don't have time to go into. But they really helped transform Tilak, especially the face of Ganeshotsav from a religious festival that is often celebrated in your own family and locality. And he transformed it by giving it an explicit political character. And he channelized the energy of Ganeshotsav in the struggle against British colonialism. So there's a quote of his where he says, "Why shouldn't we convert the large religious festivals into mass political rallies?" Writing in his newspaper called Kesari. And he describes God Ganesh not just as an obstacle remover, as Vignaharta, as he's known, that's one of his names, but as a political obstacle remover. And that's how public Ganeshotsav transformed over the years. And recently, in recent times, it is celebrated with great deal of pomp and splendor on the streets, including music, as Angelo Gubernatis described even in the 1880s. And part of that music includes what we call Dhol-Tasha Pathaks. And Dhol-Tasha Pathaks with Ganeshotsav have a very rich history. You can go and Google, you can go on YouTube and watch videos of it. You can, if you're lucky enough to be in Pune or Mumbai or Maharashtra during Ganeshotsav, you'll get to experience it in person. But the history of Dhol-Tasha Pathaks being celebrated in the context of Ganeshotsav actually traces its roots in Pune to Jnana Prabodhini. And there's a nice article in the Indian Express about it, which you can go and read about, of how Ganeshotsav was transformed by Appa Saheb Pendse, the founder of Jnana Prabodhini, in 1965, where he gave a very disciplined, energized way of celebrating Ganeshotsav. So there's a fascinating history to how the first Dhol-Tasha Pathaks originated in Pune because of Jnana Prabodhini. Today, though, Dhol-Tasha Pathaks are immense in Ganeshotsav. So in Pune alone, in 2022, there were almost 25,000 individual Dhol-Tasha performers in 120 different Dhol-Tasha troops, or what are called Pathaks in Sanskrit or Marathi. And Dhol-Tasha Pathaks are celebrated across the world. You see them in places like Spain, in New York, in Canada, in Australia. And Dhol-Tasha Pathaks in Ganeshotsav truly have a global presence today. And that is just a part of the public character of Ganeshotsav. It's not just music and Dhol-Tasha that's a part of it. There are huge public decorations, much like other festivals such as Christmas, where you see nativity displays, or Durga Puja in Calcutta, where you see these enormous mandaps and hoardings, decorations for the goddess Durga. Similarly, for Ganeshotsav, you see Dekhavas and Pandals. These are large moving displays of different stories from Ganesha's life or the lives of other gods, other religious stories. So it might be stories from the life of God Krishna, as you see on the left, or it could be tackling even very relevant contemporary issues. So you have seen instances of pandals highlighting the climate energy and social media addiction. So from the very old to the very new, these dekhavas in these pandals are really creative, and there's a lot of diversity in the topics that they highlight. In fact, this year Ganeshotsav, you see many displays highlighting India's success story in landing on the moon, on the south pole of the moon with its Chandrayaan mission. And during the coronavirus pandemic, there were many stories of Ganesh slaying the coronavirus, the Corona Asur. And there are more than 2,500 roadside pandals in Pune, more than 3,700 roadside pandals in Mumbai as of 2022. So this is the scale at which public Ganeshotsav is being celebrated. And among these thousands of Ganesh mandals, there are some that stand out. I should say that the number of these mandals, all of them don't necessarily put up such pandals. So in Pune, there's 3,000, almost 4,000 mandals. In Mumbai, there's more than 17,000 registered mandals. But some of them are more famous. So in Pune, you have the Guru Shet Halwai, for example. In Mumbai, you have examples such as Lal Bagcha Raja. And they're visited by millions of peoples and get donations worth millions of rupees. So it just occurs at a very grand scale in terms of numbers. Beyond these, the importance of mandals can also be measured in different ways. So you have what we call the 5 Manatse Ganpati, or the Ganpatis of honor in Pune. And there's 5 of them: the Kasba Ganpati, the most Pahila Manacha, first in honor; the second in honor, which is Dusra Manacha, Tamdi Zogeshwari; the third in honor, Tisra Manacha, is Guruji Talim; the fourth in honor, Chautha Manacha, is Tulshi Bagh; and the fifth in honor, Pachwa Manacha, is Kesri Wada. And many of these have a rich and old history. Kasba Ganpati's history goes back to Shivaji Maharaj, another important figure in the history of Maharashtra. And that is how some mandals definitely have more prominence than others. And does this prominence or importance, or these rankings, so to say, do they really mean anything? Do they have any real world significance? Well, yes, they do. Let's try to figure out how they do. To answer that question, we'll really have to go back to how Ganeshotsav is celebrated. And we've discussed how it is celebrated for 11 lunisolar days. That could be, 10, 11, or 12 solar days, going from Ganesh Chaturthi, that is the first day, Bhadrapad Shukla Chaturthi, the 4th of Bhadrapad, the waxing moon cycle, to the 14th of Bhadrapad, that is the Anant Chaturdashi, Bhadrapad Shukla Chaturdashi. And the beginning, that is Ganeshotsav, that's the first day, and that's pretty clear enough. That's straightforward, right? What is Ganesh Chaturthi? It's Ganesha's birthday. It's the first day of Ganeshotsav that occurs on the 4th of Bhadrapad. But what about the end of Ganeshotsav, the last day? Oh, before we talk about the last day, we should talk about, what happens on this first day, right? So on the first day, it involves installing the idol. So that's what we call the Prana Pratishtha ceremony. And it begins with the idol initially being covered. There's a huge puja that goes into the idol. And then the idol is kept on its designated spot where the Ganpati is going to be sitting for 10 days. So that's now that the Ganpati is on its designated location, there are a bunch of Aartis and a Puja occurs for the Ganpati across Ganeshotsav. And finally, on the last day of Ganpati, you have it's called Anant Chaturdashi, right? The last day of Ganeshotsav. It's the 14th of Bhadrapad. In fact, Chaturdashi literally means the 14th. And what happens on Anant Chaturdashi is a question you might ask. Well, Visarjan, Ganesh Visarjan happens on Anant Chaturdashi, and Anant Chaturdashi Visarjan involves the immersion of Ganesh idols back into the sea. That is part of the cyclic nature of Ganeshotsav, where you get the idol on the first day, but at the end, the Ganesh goes back to the sea where he came from, and he'll be back next year. And you see similar immersion traditions in other festivals as well, most notably in Durga Puja on the other side of India in Bengal. And this is an example of one of the largest Ganesh idols constructed, which is the Khairatabad Ganesh in Hyderabad. So spanned over 60 feet, over 18 meters. This is an example of a picture of that Ganesha's Visarjan. And this Visarjan process, that is almost, you could say, the crescendo, the peak, the climax of the Ganeshotsav celebrations happening on the last day. That's when those millions of people throng the streets. Here you can see an example of those tall, massive Ganesh Murtis, idols in Mumbai, and people out there on the streets celebrating these Visarjan processions. And they're huge in scale, they're massive. Jnana Prabodhini also takes part in Ganesh's Visarjan processions. In fact, as we just talked about it, we have a rich history of pioneering the Dhol-Tasha Pathaks of Pune during Ganeshotsav. Here you can see Jnana Prabodhini's female and male Pathaks on the streets. And in fact, you can also check out our videos on YouTube and live streams going on right now during Ganeshotsav of Jnana Prabodhini's Pathaks during its Visarjan processions. So this is the massive scale of Ganeshotsav. Just to give you the scale in numbers, there were more than 3,800 mandals in Ganesh mandals in Pune. Around 3,600 of them took part in the processions. And there are about more than 17,700 Ganesh mandals in Mumbai, and more than 6,600 of them took part in the Visarjan procession. So it's a truly massive occasion, thousands, millions of people on the streets. And it lasts for a long time. It lasts for more than a day. In fact, Pune's Anant Chaturdashi Visarjan processions have been lasting around 30 hours over the past decade or so. You can see how these processions came to an halt during the COVID-19 pandemic, but they were back with a bang. In fact, last year in 2022, Pune's Anant Chaturdashi procession lasted up to 31 hours, beating the record of the previous so many years. And so there you go. There you have it. That's how these rankings of importance of Ganpatis have a practical significance. That practical significance is in the Visarjan processions. The rank, the order of honor of these Ganpatis in Pune, the of man in which they come, that determines the order in which they get to be in the final Visarjan processions. And be that as it may, because It's a huge procession where there are lots of idols being immersed. In fact, in Mumbai, there were almost 2 lakh idols that were immersed in 2022. And I should mention that only about 6,000 of these, less than 7,000 of these idols were coming from Ganesh Mandals. So it's a pretty small number. And if you take a look at it in Pune, there are 3,600 or so idols from Ganesh Mandals, but there were more than 430,000 idol immersions in 2022. And that is more than twice the amount of Ganesh idols immersed in Mumbai. So Pune, even though has a smaller population than Mumbai, the scale of Ganeshotsav in Pune beats that of Mumbai's hands down. And that part of it goes to Pune being the cultural capital of Maharashtra, involved in many Marathi traditions, such as Ganeshotsav. One other question, though, you might ask here is, what about the other idols, right? If such a small proportion of the idols were from Ganesh Mandals, where did the remaining lakhs of idols come from? Well, the answer to this question lies in the fact that it's not just that people are only celebrating public or Sarvajanik Ganeshotsav. No, that is a huge part of Ganeshotsav, but that's just one part of it. Another, perhaps equally important part of Ganeshotsav is the domestic or household Ganeshotsav. Ganesh celebrations happening in your family, in your homes. And that's what we'll be talking about in the next few minutes. Should begin by saying that domestic and public Ganeshotsav share some basic similarities, right? They both happen at the same time. They both begin on Ganesh Chaturthi, that happens in Bhadrapad, on Bhadrapad Shukla Chaturthi, right after the new moon. So it's in the waxing cycle of Bhadrapad, of the moon in Bhadrapad. And both domestic and public Ganeshotsav end on Anant Chaturdashi. So that's Bhadrapad Shukla Chaturdashi, right before the full moon. And they last for 11 lunisolar days. So the basic structure of both the public and domestic Ganeshotsav is similar. However, there are other differences that come into picture here. One important difference goes into the last day of Ganeshotsav. Specifically when we are talking about the Visarjan or the immersion. So most of the immersions actually do not occur on the final day of Ganeshotsav. They do not occur on the 11th day, that is Anant Chaturdashi. And here you see data from Mumbai. So you can see how many idols were immersed in throughout Ganeshotsav 2022. And you can actually see that most of the idols, more than 60,000, were actually immersed on the second day of Ganeshotsav, followed by the 5th day of Ganeshotsav. And finally, you saw almost 40,000 idols immersed on the 11th day. There were also other idol immersions on the 3rd and the 6th day of Ganeshotsav. So what's up with that? You can see something similar in Pune. In Pune, most of the immersions did in fact occur on the final day. And the data also suggests that the second largest day preference for idol immersions was the 5th day. There's also some immersions on the 2nd and the 3rd day, but there really were not that many immersions on Pune in the beginning part of Ganeshotsav, though there were some. There were indeed like few thousands of immersions that were not occurring on the last day. So why is that happening? Why aren't all of the immersions occurring on the same day, on this last day, that is Anant Chaturdashi? Well, the reason for that is that not all domestic Ganeshotsavs are celebrated for the same number of days. And if you do celebrate Ganeshotsav, let me ask you, please tell us in the comments in the comment section below, how many days does your family celebrate Ganeshotsav? And there is a great deal of diversity, a great deal of variety in the number of days Ganeshotsav is celebrated. It could be 1.5 days, could be 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 11 days. These are some of the common number of days that family or household Ganeshotsavs tend to be celebrated. And we actually delved a little deeper into this at Jnana Prabodhini Foundation's analytics team, where we conducted a survey during Ganeshotsav 2020. That was during the first wave of the coronavirus in Pune. And we asked people, do they celebrate Ganeshotsav? And more than 80% of our survey respondents did indeed celebrate Ganeshotsav. So Ganeshotsav, household Ganeshotsav celebrations are indeed widespread. And of those, though, there is some diversity in the number of days Ganeshotsav is being celebrated. So among our respondents, we saw the highest proportion celebrating Ganeshotsav for 11 days. But there was some diversity. You saw there were other folks who celebrated Ganeshotsav for 3 days, some folks celebrating Ganeshotsav for 21% of respondents for 1.5 days, and also some for 14 and 7 days. So there's a great deal of diversity in household Ganeshotsav celebrations. And there was some diversity that was beyond these big common categories. So there are some communities such as the Kori community that celebrate Ganeshotsav for 3 weeks. There's a 21-day Ganpati that goes on over there. And in fact, 3 of our survey respondents also said that they celebrated Ganeshotsav for 21 days in their home. So what explains all of this diversity? Why is there so much numerical diversity in the number of days Ganeshotsav is celebrated? Well, to answer this question, we would want to take a look at some more traditions and diverse of Ganeshotsav. So let's go to Ganpati Pure, which is on the western coast of Maharashtra. It's a beautiful place on the seaside. You can see the mandir there in red and white, right at the coast. A very old Ganpati Mandir. The name of the town is Ganpati Pure. It's in fact named for Ganpati. And they have a tradition there where all of the Kula Daivats, or the family deities of village residents of the village Ganpati Pure, as well as 7 other villages in the nearby region, is Ganpati. Many Hindu families have a tradition of having a Kuludaivat, a family deity, which could be it could be a Devi, it could be Shankar, it could be different gods. Some Marathi families have their Kuladaivat being Ganpati, and many of these families in and around Ganpati Pure have Ganpati as their Kuladaivat. And because of that, they do not celebrate household Ganeshotsav for a limited number of days during Ganeshotsav. They have a very rich tradition where they will go to the temple, they'll do different pujas at their home, but they don't install Ganesh idols at their home, because the reasoning often goes that we have Ganesh for the entire year. It's not necessary to have it just for a few days. And you can go and read about the details of this fascinating tradition that dates back to over 500 years in this article, that the screenshot of the article that you see, which was published in Sakal. Another interesting tradition is here from a specific family, where that family can trace their tradition back to 170 years. And that partially explains, why there is this diversity of the number of days Ganpati is celebrated. We also have Ganpati for 0 days in Ganpati Pure that we just saw. And the reason lies in the different family traditions that are associated with Ganpatis. Many Ganpati families have, Marathi families have a tradition, or what is called a pratha, of celebrating Ganeshotsav. And indeed, of the participants in our survey who did respond by saying that they do celebrate Ganeshotsav in their home, 71% of them did in fact have a tradition or a pratha of celebrating Ganeshotsav, though a healthy number, about a third of them, did not have that tradition. So they were celebrating Ganeshotsav in their home, even though their family did not have a tradition. And that sort of raises a philosophical question of, how many years does something have to go on for it to be called a tradition? After all, the article of that person that we just saw, they had a family tradition of 170 years, a Ganapati family tradition of 170 years. But before 170 years, that tradition did not exist, right? And therefore, we see us we see a mark of a living religion where an organic process is happening, where new traditions are being created, where we have a third of our respondents, like over 100 people who did not have a tradition of celebrating Ganeshotsav in their family, but they've created this new tradition by themselves. Just how new traditions can be created, though, old traditions can also die out. And you see that anecdotally and also been highlighted in media articles such as these, where you have families where they earlier used to have 10-day family tradition or an 11-day family tradition, reducing down to 5, 3, or even 1.5 days. And there are multiple reasons for these traditions dying out. So let's take a look at some of those. On the left, we see an IT professional who used to celebrate Ganeshotsav for 10 days. It's actually 11 days, as we've discussed the distinction between lunisolar and solar days. But this family, after an old member in their family passed away after a hit of the COVID-19 pandemic, they cut it down from 10 days to 1.5, because both that person and their wife were working professionals. So it's similar when you see to someone on the right that they used to have it for 10 days along with the Gauri Puja. They reduced it down to a 10-day Ganpati. The main reason, as they say, everyone is busy with their own lives and therefore they have to keep it short. So you see multiple factors here. You see the demands of a modern lifestyle. You see the death of older members in a family who probably were more likely to hold on to traditions. And you see the impact of large external events like the COVID-19 pandemic that lead to the changes of traditions. What are other reasons for the change in traditions? This was the household Ganpati. If you look at public or Sarvajanik Ganeshotsav in Ganpati Mandals, we have already seen in previous parts of this session of how the Ganpati Visarjan can take over 25 hours, 26 hours, even up to 30 hours. And therefore, to avoid the crowd, some Ganpati Mandals, if you're not probably there at the beginning of the Visarjan process, if you're not a Maratha Ganpati, a Ganpati of honor, you might want to avoid the crowd. And then so you see this Ganesh Mandal here, who have been taking their Ganpatis out for Visarjan on the 8th or the 9th day. So that's how some of these traditions change over time due to practical reasons as well. However, it's not that Ganpati is completely dying out. Ganeshotsav is not going anywhere. This is how many idols were immersed during Mumbai's and Pune's Ganeshotsav over the past few years. And it's only growing. It's not changing at all. And the pandemic barely had an impact, if at all any, on Ganeshotsav. In Pune, you don't really see it having any impact. And in Mumbai, that impact seems to have easily recovered, even as early as 2021. You also see how the number of idol immersions in Pune, the scale of Pune's Ganeshotsav outnumbers Mumbai a lot. And you see an exponential growth, a very rapid growth, one should say, in Pune's Ganeshotsav over the years. However, growth should be sustainable. Unrestricted growth can often lead to unforeseen problems that are very difficult to deal with. Some of those include adverse environmental effects. So this is an example in Lucknow, which is not in Maharashtra, it's in Uttar Pradesh, where you see the impact of these Ganesh Visarjans on the river where these immersions are occurring. And one point which we didn't directly address, but probably obvious, that these immersions or Visarjans of Ganesh idols often happen in water bodies. And especially if it's synthetic Ganesh idols made of plaster of plastic, containing non-eco-friendly paints, containing flowers and other decorations, they can have an adverse environmental impact on the rivers that they're immersed in. And therefore, to address these impacts, though, Visarjan has been encouraged in recent years to be carried out in tanks. So you can see in the background the Muramutha River in Pune. However, the Visarjan of the Ganpati is happening in designated tanks. And therefore, we would encourage all of you to please carry out Visarjan or immersion in water tanks if you do so, not in public water bodies like rivers. That will prevent water pollution. Along with rivers, Visarjan can also occur in the sea. So on the Konkan coast in Mumbai, Ganpati Visarjans often occur in the sea. And again, we repeat our call of just how you should avoid Visarjan in the rivers, avoid Visarjan in the seas. Please carry out Ganesh immersions or Visarjans in water tanks instead of the sea. During the pandemic, there was an interesting innovation in Pune, which was Visarjan in these mobile structures, these Visarjan Firta Raths. So to avoid a congregation at designated water tanks, the Pune Municipal Corporation had these mobile structures, trucks of tanks, which would go from location to location for Visarjan. They have been phased out this year, and their relevance ended as the pandemic died out. And there have also been appeals for collection centers. So in the Pune Municipal Corporation, Ganesh idols can be donated back in these collection centers so that they can be processed later on by the government. So let's see what people did, what people's practices, their behaviors actually were. So this is the data from people's preferred locations for Ganesh Visarjan in Pune. This is actually in 2020, not in 2022. This is the data from our survey done in the coronavirus pandemic. And you can see at the height of the pandemic, most of the Visarjans were occurring at home. That's what people were doing. We did not really see that many people doing Visarjans in rivers. There were some people doing Visarjans in these dedicated tanks as well. And interestingly, there were some people who celebrated Ganeshotsav at home who did not carry out Visarjans at all. And that is another part of the diversity of Ganeshotsav, that there are some traditions where people do not carry out this Visarjan at all. They keep that Ganpati in their home throughout the year and they do the Visarjan next year. So there's another different, interesting diversity in the traditions of household Ganeshotsav. Suffice to say, during the pandemic, Ganeshotsav Visarjan tended to occur in people's homes. How did that change last year after as the pandemic came to an end? Well, as the pandemic came to an end, this is the data not from a survey. This is actual data from the Pune government, from Pune Municipal Corporation, where we saw, yes, indeed, a large number of people did conduct these Visarjans, these immersions in these tanks, these iron tanks designated for Ganpati Visarjan. So that's a very encouraging sign. Last year, these mobile structures, which were a COVID era policy, were not really used. And in fact, they had received some criticism as well last year due to the amount of money that was invested on them. And then they did not end up being used. And a healthy number of idols were also donated in these collection centers. So this is the state of Ganesh Visarjan last year, and we hope these behaviors continue and people avoid conducting Visarjans in the rivers and water bodies this year. Why we mention that specifically is because practices can change over time or can get worse over time. If you take a look at Ganesh Visarjans in Mumbai, during the pandemic, not an equal amount of Visarjans occurred in these tanks and in these seas. However, during 2022, so a year after the pandemic, you see a larger share of these Visarjans, these idol immersions occurring in the sea rather than in these government designated tanks. So residents of Mumbai should be upping their game and trying to conduct immersions in these tanks rather than the sea. Only about 28% of household Ganpati idols get immersed in the sea, in tanks in Mumbai. These are household Ganpatis, and Ganesh Mandals do even worse. It's less than about 5%. So households are doing better, like about 5 to 6 times better than Ganesh Mandals. However, there is definitely a lot of scope for improvement over here. And as we said, there's scope for improvement, right? Ganeshotsav related behaviors can change over time, and that's just part of how any organic, dynamically changing activity, socioeconomic practice like a festival works out. These behaviors change over time. And we have already discussed in the earlier part of this session of how public or Sarvajanik Ganeshotsav has evolved significantly over the years, from the 1700s throughout the 19th century and the 20th century till today. It has a long history. However, domestic or household Ganeshotsav has indeed a much longer history than public or Sarvajanik Ganeshotsav. And we won't have time to go into all of this history. And indeed, a lot of that history, as you go farther and farther back in time, gets uncertain. It gets foggy. It's what we call the fog of the past. And therefore, we will restrict ourselves to ancient, medieval, and modern history of Ganeshotsav, or rather the history of the worship of Ganesha in particular. And over the years, we'll look at some of the identifiable elements of Ganpati or Ganesha as we know today, and how we celebrate Ganeshotsav. So some of the earliest examples of the worship of an elephant type figure can be traced back to the Pashupati seal of the Indus Valley civilization, so almost 5,000 years ago. This figure has been identified as what a proto-Shiva or a proto-Rudra, and shows 4 animals around it: an elephant, a tiger, a rhinoceros, and a water buffalo, a bison, should we say. And that's the earliest example of a wild animal, of an elephant that you see in a religious context, in the religious seal in the Indian subcontinent. Moving ahead in time, but a bit farther from home, you see a plaque from Luristan in western Iran. You see, of a elephant-headed, an elephant figure, an anthropomorphic figure with an elephant head, with human hands and human torso and feet. And that person is holding a quill. It's been identified with a snake around it. There's a trident that is a trishul as well. So these are some of the earliest examples of elephant figures that have been associated or linked with wisdom. You know, the quill is a sign of learning. You see it in western Iran, in the Luristan region. The first instance of the word Ganapati. Ganapati actually means the Lord of the Ganas. So Pati is Lord, Gana is we'll come to what Ganas are in just a second. And it's from this shloka called Gananam Tvam Ganapati Gam Havamahe Kamim Kamimam Upamashravastvamam. And that can be traced to the second mandala of the Rig Veda. So about 4,000 years ago. Again, dates are difficult to establish for these. And it is unclear whether this refers to Ganpati in the modern sense, as we know Ganpati today, though going ahead, Ganpati definitely has been identified. His iconography has been identified with the Ganas. So you see Ganpati surrounded by Ganas, who are these minor deities associated with Shaiva cults, with Shankara. So that's Ganpati, or Ganesh as we know him today. Iconography or idols of Ganesh, you start seeing the earliest examples as we would know them today across the Indian subcontinent in the Satavahana and the Kushana periods. So the Satavahanas ruled what is today Maharashtra, and here you see terracotta and terracotta archaeological artifacts found in fact near Aurangabad in the Pala district. And you see examples on the right from the 2nd century, from the Kushana period, of a Ganesh figure from Mathura. And this is currently in the National Museum in New Delhi. You interestingly also see other aspects that are identified with Ganeshotsav and Ganpati today. So Ganeshotsav, at least for kids, part of its celebration is identified with this sweet, the Modak, that is Ganpati's favorite sweet. In fact, you can see Ganpati carrying a Modak in his top left, in his front left hand. And Modak is a steamed rice dumpling filled with jaggery and coconut. And one of Ganpati's many names is in fact Modakapriya, so someone who loves Modak. But the history of Modak is actually also very old, and you can see its origins in the Ayurveda, in the Ramayana, in the Mahabharata, and it has been identified as early as 200 BC. More than 2,000 years old. And perhaps fittingly, the Modak has spread across many parts of the world that have an influence, an Indic influence. So just how at the beginning we saw Ganesh being celebrated in as far wide as Tibet and Japan and Thailand and Indonesia, we also see Modak in different parts of the world. So you see Modak in Cambodia, known as Numkom. We see Modak in Thailand, known as Khanom Kho. Modak is also known differently in different parts of India. So in Tamil, it is known as Kodakattai. And you also see the Modak in Japan, where it is known as Kangidan. And interestingly enough, the word for Modak is the same as the word for Ganpati, Kangiten. That's the word for the deity that is identified in Japan with Ganeshotsav, with Ganpati, the elephant head god. So that's the international spread of many of these very popular food items, practices that we associate with Ganeshotsav as we know it today. Moving a bit ahead in history, as we start seeing beyond those early depictions of Ganeshotsav and the traditions that we see associated with him, we see the Ganpati being worshipped more and more and more popularly. So there was the Ganapatya tradition, specifically a Shaiva tradition, part of the Shiva tradition, who explicitly worship Ganpati. And in fact, Ganpati was important enough that in the Smartha tradition that really emphasized on finding a syncretic approach, an equal approach between the prominent Hindu dharmic Indic traditions around that time, which was the 4th or 5th century AD, you see Ganapati or Ganesh being represented there in the center, along with other deities such as Shiva, Vishnu, Shakti, that is the Devi, and Surya as well. So Surya was very popular back in those times. And you see the iconography of Ganesh as we know him today in places like Afghanistan. This is a beautiful marble sculpture from the Shahi dynasties of Afghanistan in a place called Gardes. So it's the Gardes Ganesha from the 8th century AD in Afghanistan. And you also see in this diversity of Ganesh, you see female representations of Ganesh. So Ganesha, one of Ganesha's names is Vinayaka. There is also representations of what we see between what have been called Vinayaki or Ganeshini in places as far apart as Kanyakumari to Prayagraj, what used to be called Allahabad in northern India from the 9th century, 8th century AD. So Ganesh is really popular and established. The worship of Ganesh is established across the subcontinent at this point in history. And that's when you start seeing the emergence of the literature, the shlokas, the rituals, the prayers that we would know with Ganesh today. So in terms of numbers, Ganesh has 1,000 names. So there is a Ganesha Sahasranama that is part of the Ganesha Purana. And the Ganesh Purana, its compositions, its writings, its written artifacts, manuscripts. You can trace them back over the past many centuries, from between the 13th to the 18th century. And the Ganapati Atharva Shirsha as well. That's something which we in Jnana Prabodhini often say when Jnana, or recite when Ganeshotsav is celebrated. Part of both the domestic Ganeshotsav in Jnana Prabodhini and the public Ganeshotsav. 5th to 7th graders go out and recite the Ganapati Atharva Shirsha. You can trace back its composition to the past 400, 500 years. And in fact, the most quintessential and possibly universal aspect of Ganeshotsav is the Ganesh Aarti session that is celebrated in probably many Marathi households. And if at all you know something of how Maharashtrian or Marathi Ganeshotsav is celebrated, it is celebrated with this Aarti session across this 11-day festival, be it in the public or the domestic celebration. And there will be at least 3 elements of this Aarti session. It will start off with the Sukha Karta Dukha Harta Aarti. It will be followed in between with the Ghalin Lotangan shloka, and it will conclude with the Mantra Pushpanjali. And if we take a closer look at these parts, the Sukha Karta Dukha Harta Aarti, which is exclusively it is dedicated to Ganesha, to Ganapati. It was composed by Samartha Ramdas in the 17th century. If we go to Ghalin Lotangan has many layers across history to its composition, from as far back as the 6th century AD to the Kali Santarana Upanishad, to as recently as the 13th or 14th century to verses composed by Santa Namdev. It also features verses composed by Adi Shankaracharya and Bhagavata from the Bhagavata Puran. From the 8th to the 10th century. And the final part, the Mantra Pushpanjali, which is a recitation. The name literally translates shloka about flowers. So it's right before the final flowers are offered to the Ganpati idol, and that trace has roots going back to the Vedas, specifically to the Taittiriya Aranyaka of the Rig Veda from the 2nd millennium BC. So there's a long history to many of the very familiar elements that we practice even today, to the rituals that we practice even today. And of course, there are a lot of customizations and variations. There's a lot of diversity in how Ganeshotsav is celebrated. There are other popular Aartis that are typically sung in Maharashtrian or Marathi Ganeshotsav celebrations. So there's the Aarti to Shakti, that is Durge Durgata Bhari. There is the Aarti to Shiva, that is Lavathauti Vikrala. There is the Aarti to Datta, Guru Datta, which is Trigunatmaka Murti. And there is the Aarti to Vithala. And two popular Aartis are often sung to Vithala, including Yuge Atthavisa as well as Yeyo Vitthale. And it is worth noting here that Datta and Vithala especially are deities which are geographically restricted. You will see their worship being restricted to regions like Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and Telangana. So in the Deccan Plateau, in the western, central, and south central parts of Maharashtra. But by far the more common Aartis here are the Aartis of Shakti and Shiva, both very popular deities as we've seen at the beginning. And it's perhaps fitting because Ganesha is in fact the son of Parvati and Shiva, and we do not have time to go into all of the history and all of the mythologies and the legends and the itihasas of how Ganesh came to being, but he is the son of Shankara, that is Shiva, and Parvati, Devi, Shakti, and therefore he unites the two branches of Shiva branch and the Shakta branch. So the Ganapatya tradition, the Ganapatya branch is important in Hinduism in its own right because it plays a very important role as a confluence of uniting the Shiva and the Shakta paramparas or traditions of Hinduism. And Ganesha's origin story again features both Shankara and Parvati. He was created by Parvati using clay and from her own body. That's how he came out to being, through Devi, with a human head, in fact. And Shankara didn't know that he was her son, and they entered a conflict. There was a battle where Shankara, in fact, cut off the human head of Ganesha as he started off being. And then there's a huge story of how there was a battle and how it got resolved, and how Shankara and Parvati resolved their conflict and made it up to each other by installing the head of an elephant onto that body. And that is how Ganesha, as we know today, came out to being. So the history of Ganpati, the story of the itihasa of Ganesha is intricately linked to both Shakti, that is Parvati, the Devi, and Shankara, that is Shiva. And Shankara is pretty popular as well as Lakshmi in Western India. They're the third and the fourth most popular deities in the western parts of India. And that actually takes us to another interesting or unique part of Ganeshotsav, how as it is celebrated today in Maharashtra. Along with the domestic household Ganpati or the Ganesh idol, which you see right there in between in the center, there is also a tradition of the domestic Gauri Puja, the worship of the Devi. And there are many histories and traditions behind this, which we will not have time to go into in this session. But they are an integral part in many celebrations of household Ganeshotsav. There's a diversity of decorations in them as well. So these are decorations of them in the Corona time. You can also see metal idols of them, and their names are Jyeshtha and Kanishtha. And different parts of Maharashtra, different families, different traditions have different histories of these. But when are they worshipped? So this Gauri Puja occurs during Ganeshotsav. It occurs for 3 lunisolar days. It begins with the Jyeshtha Gauri Avahan. It culminates, the peak, the crescendo is the Jyeshtha Gauri Pujana, involving a huge puja and a huge dinner, a lunch, a huge feast. It concludes with the Jyeshtha Gauri Visarjana, which involves an immersion, a Visarjana of the Jyeshtha Gauri. And this occurs, the Jyeshtha Gauri Avahana, it begins after Rishi Panchami, that is Bhadrapada Shukla Panchami. So if you remember, Ganeshotsav began on Ganesh Chaturthi, so Bhadrapad Shukla Chaturthi, the 4th of Bhadrapad. Gauri Avahan occurs after Rishi Panchami, and then there is some nuance of how exactly, when exactly it begins. But interestingly, in many family traditions, the Gauri and the Ganesha Visarjana occur together. So Gauri, the last day of Gauri Puja, the Gauri Pujan, which is the Gauri Visarjan, also goes hand in hand with the Ganesh Visarjan. So in fact, this question, the answer to this question, how many days is Ganeshotsav celebrated in your family, could be variable for some people. It could be depends for some people, and it would depend upon how many days the Gauris are in your family that year. And in families with Gauri and Ganesh traditions, Ganeshotsav is celebrated for a different number of days, a different number of solar days, should we say, each year. And this is the data set from the past century, which we compiled and analyzed, of how the duration of these Gauri Ganesh Visarjans changed over the past century. So almost half of them are a 6-day Gauri Ganesh, and a quarter each we have 7 and 5 days each. And you can see how they have evolved over the past century from 1924 to 2023, going from 5, 6, and 7 solar days. Domestic Gauri Ganesh is not that widespread. Not many people have a tradition of celebrating Gauri Ganesh. In fact, more of them do not than do, though it's evenly split from our survey sample, as opposed to an overwhelming majority of folks who did celebrate Ganeshotsav in their home. Most people do not even, most of our survey respondents do not even celebrate Gauri Ganesh. And if you look at tradition, those of the folks who did celebrate Gauri Ganesh did have a tradition of doing so. So unlike Ganesh, where almost a third of folks who celebrated domestic Ganeshotsav did not have a family tradition of doing so. They were doing it out of their own will. They had created their own family tradition from scratch, so to say. Not many folks seemed to have created a Gauri Ganesha tradition from scratch, though there were some, a healthy 10% of folks. And that is borne out by other data as well. So from data from Mumbai's BMC from 2022, Gauri idols actually accounted for a very minuscule fraction, less than 4% of the total immersions that occurred during last year's Ganeshotsav. That being said, though, Gauri Puja is an important part of Ganeshotsav. It is a very important facet of it. It is important because there are actually some households which do not have household Ganeshotsav, and they would only celebrate Gauri. In fact, many households in Ganapati Pure and regions around those, in the tradition that we have discussed at the beginning of this session, that goes back to over 500 years, some of those families have a tradition of only celebrating the Gauri Puja. That is also common in other parts of Maharashtra, such as Vidarbha, Nagpur, the Akola region, where there is only this Gauri Pujan, where they're known as the Mahalakshmis. And in fact, 8 survey respondents in our survey conducted by JPF Analytics did have a tradition of celebrating Gauri, but did not have a tradition of celebrating Ganpati. So there is also that diversity in Ganeshotsav. And thus, there are many, many facets of Ganeshotsav. And of course, we cannot cover all of them in this session. It's a whole PhD that could be done in these. Where one could talk about Ganeshotsav and ecology. So there is this tree called Erythrea variegata or Erythrina indica, also known as Pangara or the Indian coral tree. And traditionally, many household Ganapatis that were made of clay, not plaster of Paris, from the local clay, from your local clay river in many different villages of Maharashtra, the eyes of those Ganapatis were made from the seeds of Pangara. So it involved a connection to the ecology, the local ecology of Maharashtra. Today, though, these Ganesh idols are created on a massive scale, a very large scale, and producing those leads to a huge economy. We saw that how lakhs of Ganesh idols are immersed in Mumbai and Pune alone. So, like millions of idols are produced a year if you look across India, Maharashtra, and there are places which are known, regions or cities. A village called Pen in Konkan is known for the Ganesh idol production industry. So Ganeshotsav has a huge impact. One of its facets is that of the economy. Ganesh is also known for his wit. We only got to take a look at his origin story. There are many stories in the Puranas associated with Ganesh, and one of the more famous ones is how Ganesh and his brother Kartikeya, which you see in the back on a peacock, got into a fight with each other. They're brothers. Both of their parents are Shiva and Parvati, which you see of who is the more favorite son. And Shiva and Parvati did not want to resolve the battle, and so the way Ganesh and Kartikeya decided to resolve the battle, they decided to have a competition, and they decided to see who can go around the world 3 times. And different deities in Hinduism, in Hindu traditions, religions, often have their own vahans or their own animals associated with them, their vehicles. So Ganesha's vehicle is a mouse, and you can see that mouse down below. Even in today's iconography is associated with a mouse, while Kartikeya, his brother's vehicle, is a peacock. So Kartikeya hops on his peacock and sets off to fly around the world. Ganesh realizes that there's no hope, that I cannot possibly go around the world on my mouse 3 times. But then he just decides to go around his parents 3 times, and he tells them, oh, you are my world. And that's how he wins the bet. That's how he wins the competition. He defeats his brother Kartikeya, the god of war, with his wit, with his intellect. So there's many such stories about Ganesh that are associated with him, are associated with Ganeshotsav. Ganesh is also associated with education. One of his stories involves of how he is the scribe of the Mahabharata, which is narrated by Vyasa Muni. And the Mahabharata is the longest epic poem in the world. So it's 10 times the length of the Iliad and the Odyssey combined. So over 1.8 million words, that is like 0.1 million shlokas, have gone into the Mahabharata. And so Ganesh is the only person who has the intellect to be the scribe of this. That's the association or the symbolism of Ganesha as a god. And therefore, he is of critical importance to us at Jnana Prabodhini Foundation, in our analytics team, as we seek to promote data cultures, strengthen research infrastructures, and deepen democratic values, especially as part of today's education and outreach session, where we are facilitating data-driven opinion formation and decision-making. We really respect or value the symbolism or the spirit of Ganesha's intellect, or the value of having a scientific outlook to the world. And so you can go and take a look at our other sessions on our website, including an introduction to data visualization, data scraping, data pipelines, think tanks, computational social science, research infrastructure, artificial intelligence and its impact on education. There's a host of topics that you can go. So do go and check them out. There are other aspects that Jnana Prabodhini Foundation does more broadly. Education is one of our three main pillars, along with women leadership development and rural development. And part of that pillar is our Learn India campaign 2023 going on right now, where you can donate and contribute to the education of children in India. We have a big target of sponsoring the education of rural children so that they can also be able to do data analysis, learn, and have wonderful futures. And it's not just that we directly donate money, we also do career guidance sessions, we promote skill-based training, we sponsor educational expenses, of course, we improve educational infrastructure, there's a fostering of English communication skills. So there's many ways that you can support, of course, by donating, but also by volunteering, by sharing this video. So I'll appeal to you to please reach out and do so. But that is all that we have today in this session of Bappa and Data, a data exploration of Ganeshotsav by Jnana Prabodhini Foundation's analytics team. We'll see you next time during another education and outreach session organized by JPF Analytics. Thank you and happy Ganeshotsav. Ganeshotsavacha Shubhecha.